Hello, this is a special Round 7 breaking news edition of the MLS Fantasy Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Reid Connolly from MLSFantasyBoss.com, and I'm joined by my co-host, Michael Dentons. Mike, thanks for joining me tonight.
I'm doing well and doing warm, and warmer than anyone who would have gone to tonight's game would have been. So
that's for sure. I tried to make this a bit more of a serious intro with my newscaster voice. I don't know, maybe that's sort of like a pseudo Batman villain newscaster. Actually, I don't know what just happened there, but yeah. So if you have not been paying attention, some big news dropped from MLS this morning. Around, I guess it's still morning. It was around 11:15, and we're going to talk about that tonight. We had some requests on Twitter to do this. Mike had already pitched the idea. If you've been living under a rock and you didn't get Mike's joke just then, the Seattle versus Colorado, or Colorado versus Seattle, home team first, game has been canceled. So if you were looking around on your team, wondering what's going on, it didn't happen. That game is canceled. Why? Weather. Hashtag because MLS. Hashtag because Colorado. Hashtag Snowmageddon again 2019.
They're calling it a blizzard cyclone, blizzard cone. I'm in Louisiana. Don't bring up cold weather. Like if it gets close to freezing, like we shut down. So I don't really understand what snow is. I understand like scientifically the concept, but otherwise no.
So there's a snow cone up in Colorado right now.
Yeah,
and that's canceled. Game.
There's bad weather across the U.S. We'll actually talk about it this weekend. Snow may impact a few games. But, it's something we don't cover a whole lot here on MLSFI is weather forecast. We will try to hire a meteorologist ASAP.
Work on that. So what does this mean for your fantasy team? And that's been the buzz on Twitter right now. So the official response from the @MLS Fantasy Twitter account retweeted the message from the Sounders and a message that I sent out talking about what Ben was looking into. And the comment was, the postponement will have no effect on last night's match and scoring. And that's the DC versus Montreal game. The message that was sent to me was asking about that. And my response was that Ben was collecting information on the full impact. The other bit of information that we got from Ben, and Mike and I have confirmed by checking team availability right now, is that the Seattle and Colorado players are still eligible for transfer. So those players did not lock tonight like they would have normally. So that's it as far as impact. DC Montreal points stand as is. Those two teams are still on a double game week. Seattle, Colorado players are now on a single game week, and those players can still be traded up until their start date of their game this weekend on Saturday. But that's not where the buzz ends. And this is Mike and I are going to talk about this a little bit because that answer has not been well received by some within the MLS fantasy community. Mike, do you want to kind of sum up what the conversation's been going on today?
Well, there's been a lot of conversation about whether or not we should have still had a double game week for DC and Montreal. Some people said it should have been reset and those points essentially just not counted, if I'm understanding their requests or argument. Because a lot of people made choices about picking certain double game week players over DC and Montreal players, thinking that we had it. And I'll give you an example for myself. I did not pick Diallo because I had Keehee from Seattle. I thought he was a better player, and even though I liked him as a double game week, I went with Seattle over Montreal. Had I known that Seattle was on a single game week and not a double game week, I wouldn't have made that decision. So that's kind of the argument, is that we had bad information. I have some feelings about that, where I think MLS, as critical as I usually am about MLS, I think they made the right decision here. I don't think you can wipe away scores, especially after the fact. I don't think it would have been fair to people who did make the choice to go heavy DC, Montreal, thinking that this was a great opportunity for a clean sheet. I don't think this is any significantly different than if, for example, I find out that Vela is injured on Saturday, and then it's like, shoot, I would have had Zlatan or Quintero or someone else, and said, things come up all the time that you don't end up getting the points that you thought. I didn't know that McCann was going to get injured in the 57th minute of the game last night. I didn't get those points. I wish I would have known that, but no one could have known that. Everyone had a fair situation. Yes, it affects some players differently than others, but I don't know how MLS could have made any other choice.
And we've seen other weather delays and weather postponements in games before. And I know that at that time, none of us have ever called foul or asked for points to be wiped away. True, they may not have been during a double game week. And it sucks. Don't get me wrong. I get it. I made the same decisions that Mike's talking about. I had Ladero as a captain, and so I'm not going to be a person who has the opportunity to have a double game week captain. This squarely for me falls into that hashtag because MLS saying that we usually are so free to throw out there casually, but these things happen. These things happen in sports, and unfortunately, these things happen in fantasy. But as we were saying on the show a couple of days ago, this is a long stretch of double games that we've getting started. This was just the tip of the iceberg, and frankly, it wasn't the best of double game weeks that we have. Yeah, sure, we had DC we have DC and we had Seattle, and they had some great double game week potential, but they weren't the best options for a great double game week. If you look ahead to round 9, we have, let's see here, 2, 4, 6, like 10 teams, about 10 teams on a double game week. And that's going to include LA Galaxy, which has been doing better with Sultan, Minnesota, which has been on a roll. Sorry, Mike, New York City. We also have some value points that you might be able to get out of Chicago. You have Columbus that's going to be thrown into mix, as well as Seattle. And San Jose's playing twice in that week. And that's 2 chances you get to bet against San Jose. So there are a lot of great double game weeks that we have coming up. Round 9, round 11, round 12, round 14. These are all still in the spring season. Plenty of time to make up from a small blip in the road. So I'm with you, Mike. I'm 100% against trying to wipe away the first match, trying to reset captains, and just think that the right decision was been made. And I appreciate the advance notice that we were able to be given. And I feel sorry about Seattle having to travel all the way to Colorado and having to travel back, because that is something I think is worth factoring into team selections this week. So that's all we're going to say. Do you have something else, Mike?
I'll say one more thing. Thankfully, we have unlimited rolling transfers that we could actually take care of this situation. 2 years ago, we'd have been stuck with a whole lot of Colorado players.
Yep,
so,
that's right.
Could have been a lot worse. And I mean, if you're upset because this put too much emphasis on double game weeks and you didn't make the right adjustments, maybe we should not have double game weeks. But I mean, that's an argument for another time. I don't think MLS. You know what? I hate you.
That's absolutely ridiculous. Let's just keep moving forward now. So the next question after what happened is, well, what about my team? What do I do now? So how to respond? The clear answer is Colorado, for me, Mike, I'll let you weigh in a second, is no longer as appealing of a team for a double game week now that they're on a single game week. They're still going to be home, but they're playing against Columbus, and that's not necessarily the easiest.
You mean DC?
Sorry, yes, they're playing against DC. Montreal's playing Columbus. There we go. I knew Columbus was playing away this week. Colorado's playing against DC. Not the best of a way. Did we get an update on the red card, Mike?
No extension, so Rooney's going to be playing.
So Rooney's back. Colorado is not as appealing as they were, with a chance for Kai at a couple of goals, or maybe get a lucky clean sheet from Hobert or something like that at that value 4.0. Not as appealing. Seattle, bit of a toss-up. Mike, I'm interested in hearing what you think about Seattle as how to react to this.
To me, I don't know how many choices of Seattle. I don't think their clean sheet chances are as good at home. I mean, I know they're at home, but Toronto has shown an ability to get some goals with Pozuelo. Plus, I mean, you mentioned the travel. And then the final kicker for me is that most of their players are very expensive. I mean, Ladero is a $12 million forward with high ceiling, but also kind of a low floor. While their defenders are pretty good, if it's not a double game week, I'm more likely to look at for value. So for me, I got rid of all my Seattle players this week. I had Ladero, Kihi, and Roldan. Obviously, Roldan's not going to get as many points now because he doesn't have the double up factor. So to me, I went elsewhere. I found some budget midfielder options. I went more expensive up top, and then cheap made my defense a lot cheaper. So I changed them around my team completely, and I think you did as well.
I did, yeah. So Mike and I didn't have a whole lot of time to prep before this podcast, so we're sort of hearing what each other did on the fly a little bit before we started. I also had a complete overhaul with my team, and dropping Seattle players was a key part of that. For me, I had McCann on my back line. He was the only defender who had played with the hamstring injury. I really wanted to pay more attention to that because I had a 4.0 scrub and I had Hoberry on the bench and 2 Seattle defenders. I was really stacking up there with the defense. And Mike's right, they're expensive. And I found that my ability to adjust my midfield to something I was much more comfortable with, or my forward line to something I was much more comfortable with balancing my switcheroos just to have cover for this strange round, was really being hindered by the expensive backline that I had. And so I decided it was worth dropping Seattle players, and that included Ladero, who was my captain, to free up that money to get coverage from other single week games that I thought was still appealing. Now, the next question for that is Ladero someone you should drop? I think that's got to be a judgment call for people. In my case, my budget dictated. I mean, I can't be like a good friend Andrew Winter, who's sitting here over, I think, 123 million is his budget. He's just Mr. Moneybags. But a lot of us still have some budget restrictions, and so Ladero's price as a 12 million player hurt that some. And so I thought it was better for my team to have some of that safety net to react to some of these changes. And I got rid of Ladero because I agree with what Mike said. Toronto is not the easiest of teams that they can face even on the road. If you want Ladero, I do still think he's a decent option, though I'm not sure if I would make him a captain under these situations without a double game week.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much right. I mean, Ladero at home is always going to be a viable fantasy choice, no matter if it's single game week or double game week. It's just a matter of whether or not you find other options and have the budget. So
now, what I will say is if you're still thinking about Rui Diaz, that may be more viable now because a lot of us had assumed that he might play 30 in this Colorado game that was never to be, or maybe get in the beginning, maybe put in a 60 or something like that. We thought he would not play the whole game and then would maybe come back for Toronto. That could still happen against Toronto since it will really be the first game, but this extra time has some more practice to it, maybe gives him a little bit more chance to get back up to fitness. And so Rui Diaz could be more back into the picture if that's a direction you want to go. I did not. Mike did not. So let's get on and start talking about players to target. I'm going to open this section with first a correction from last week. I was talking about the Behind the Numbers article series with XG predictions on MLSFantasyBoss.com. And I mistakenly said Ryan Anderson wrote that. He is MLS Stats on Twitter and does some writing for us every now and then. Great guy, great content. And I mistakenly said Ryan instead of Kyle McElhenney. Kyle is the one who's been writing for us a lot with MLS Fantasy Boss. He is actually at MLSFB_BTN, and that stands for Behind the Numbers. And so that's the series. He has updated that for this single game week. And I'm going to read off a few of the teams right now before we kick this off. Thanks to @TheDummyRun, also on Twitter, who's working with Kyle to get these numbers put together in these charts. The Week 7 defensive rankings, best teams. He's got LAFC, Houston, Montreal, Chicago, and then RSL as the 3 strongest defenses coming in for his stats calculation. So I think that's factored into some of our picks. And then going on to offensive rankings, he has LAFC, Houston, Seattle, Chicago, and Dallas as the top 5 offenses. So that does lend some more to maybe a Ladero or a Rui Diaz pick. You can head over to MLSFantasyBoss.com now to check that out and find all the lists, but that's just a quick way. I wanted to open up this segment before I said, Mike, who were you targeting, players and or games that you think people should be looking at for refreshing their team?
Well, I think the first one, and we talked about it a little bit on the podcast on Monday night, but that's LAFC versus Cincinnati. Now that there's not another, 2 pairs of double game week teams to compete with it, I think it looks a lot more attractive. I've gone ahead and I've brought in Carlos Vela. I didn't have him on my team because I was thinking about Quintero, but Quintero's status seems to be more questionable than I thought on Monday. Plus, I'm not sure I'll be able to check that lineup. So I've gone ahead and put Vela in. Plus, I wanted to make sure I had the money too. I've also brought in Betashore on the bench. I may swap him into the starting lineup depending on what happens. And then I also brought in a few Dallas players. I like their matchup a lot. I Portland's been pretty bad all year. We saw how they self-destructed against San Jose. And plus, Dallas has a lot of really cheap options. So I have Cannon and Paxton Pomykal in there as well. I don't need goalkeeper coverage. I already had Evan Bush, and he's already gotten clean sheets, so that's already locked down. But those are some of the new players I brought in. I also have K from LAFC in the midfield. 8.8, he's been super consistent, and as long as there's no injury concerns, I almost think he's a must-have.
Yeah, that's a great pickup. I have also brought in some LAFC players, actually only one player. I already had Vela in my starting team. He was the only, I think it was the only, I've switched it up now, but he was the only single game week player I was really going for in my starting 11. I thought that he just had a great shot at maybe a brace and assist or at least a brace, something like that at Cincinnati. So he stayed. I supplemented him with Betashore because I like his attacking potential that he shows, and I think that could be of use and result in points for him against FC Cincinnati. And I mentioned earlier that I was struggling with my defense, so that's why I made some of these changes. I also brought in Fontas, and I have him on my bench along with Hollingshead. So a 6 and a 7 was actually a downgrade from a couple of the Seattle guys that I had. So I saved a few bits of cash right there and used some of the cash I saved from Ladero to add to defense to give me some options to try to balance out McCann's 1. That's what I was going for in that situation. Was he's not going to play again with the hamstring. He's out for, I'd say, at least 3 weeks. That's what you usually see with the hamstring. So I'm trying to counter out that one with a couple of solid defensive options and players that are likely going to see a price rise as well, because I'd still like to get a little bit more money, maybe catch up to Andrew Winter as well. Moving on to midfield, this is where for me I have one player that's still questionable. I did end up going with Acosta. I changed at the very last minute to Acosta, and I brought in Titer as well. So there were not two guys I was originally going to go with, but after second guessing myself, listening to some other pundits, I was like, maybe I should. So I at least get some double game week coverage there. So I had Acosta and Titer, and I needed to switch that up to give me some more options. I brought in Memo Rodriguez from Houston because he's been doing great. Should see a price rise if nothing else. And then I have, I also had Piete on my bench trying to consider maybe some double game week high floor potential. And then right now I have Alessandrini. And that's because I did not want to spend the money on Zlatan, as I wanted to use that other places. And I don't know if I'm going to keep Alessandrini. I thought about a third LAFC player. I thought about Paxton Pomykal for a little bit to try to take advantage of Portland's poor form. Maybe even another Houston player if I want to try to take advantage of San Jose. But right now it's on Alessandrini because I'm wondering if Zlatan is going to continue to generate his own chances through PKs, or if Alessandrini is going to get back into the mix and help with some assists for Zlatan, since I'm not willing to shell out that money for him. But that's where my mind is with midfield. What about you, Mike?
Well, I already mentioned K and Pomykal. I had a less midfield spots than you did because I also had Titer, from Montreal. Another player I brought in, obviously I've been really high on Dallas right now, is Grozo, or not Grozo. God, that's terrible. Grozo.
For us, that's terrible.
Yeah. 7.7, been very consistent. He only missed last week for a team violation, but otherwise he's been very good. Other names I haven't put in my lineup, but have been toying around. Rusnak at home against Orlando. Artel and Rusnak particularly have done pretty well against bad teams. Orlando City is a bad team and concedes a lot, and so I think on the road, good potential there. Another one to keep in mind, Gill from New England. Atlanta United has been the same Atlanta that they've been, although Gill has gotten up to 10.8, so he's not as cheap as he was a few weeks ago when everyone had him during the international break, but still someone to keep in mind. And I wanted to mention on Memo for Houston, there is some concerns about the injury. I think he came off maybe with a hamstring issue on the last game. So if you have him, I actually had him in my lineup first, but then took him out when I found out about the injury concerns. So if you want to go that direction, make sure you check that lineup because there's some questions about his availability.
Well, I don't think I'm going to do that then. I'll wait for that lineup, though.
Yeah, see, this has been a week of like, oh, hey, he's a great midfielder. Oh, wait, he's cheap because there's an injury concerns.
But it's not that bad of a problem for fantasy managers because Houston plays the 3 o'clock game on Saturday.
Mhm.
There's still lots of options after that. Mike was talking about Paxton and Rusnak and other people. I know that's not the same quite price point that
And I've heard some
Rodriguez in,
people
but
throw. I just wanted to throw out. Some heard some people throw out Ibarra, but there's one other place that there's going to be an issue with snow, and that is Minnesota. I think they're expecting 2 inches of snow. Obviously, no word about a cancellation yet, but if you want to go with Minnesota, probably need to make sure that game is going to be happening. It is one of the. I think it's the second or third. It's the fourth game on Saturday at 4 o'clock Central Time. So plenty of time to move around after you see that lineup, but. If you want to go that route, which I understand because of how terrible New York City's been, just make sure you check that lineup.
yes, definitely. Let's go. Did you cover all your forwards, Mike?
I think so. I mean, I kept CJ Sapong that I picked last week, although I toyed seriously with upgrading him to Elise from the Houston Dynamo to take advantage of that. Also tried to see if I can make the money work somehow, some way to get in Zlatan, but that never happened.
Yeah, I toyed with that as well. I ended up bringing in Elise to have coverage there. Again, betting against San Jose is what that was, that they're not going to hit that ball out of the park, kick that ball out of the stadium again, and especially since Houston does have a pretty good attack. When Memo is healthy, Elise, Manotas, all those guys up there, I think that's a good pick. And he's been a little bit more consistent recently, a little bit more on form than he has at times been in 2018. So I'm going with Elise and Vela, and I don't think I've mentioned it yet, but I have moved my captain to Vela in that FC Cincinnati game, and I think you did the same, Mike?
Yes.
So there we go. Vela captain. He was a pretty solid captain option in general, I think, for this round. But with it being mostly single game week now, I think if you have already not captained a DC player or a Montreal player, if you're some sort of crazy wizard, then I think some guy who likes to bet, I guess, is really not a wizard. But I think that Vela is the strongest of the captain options that you have left. And if you have not, I think that's the best option to move to. A lot of people are going to be thinking that way. So if nothing else, it's going to hedge your bets to make sure you don't fall a lot if you didn't get a lot of double game week coverage coming out of this game. I think we've covered a lot of it. If you look through the roster here, I think Mike's mentioned some of the other games that could have potential. My favorite games are the Houston versus San Jose matchup, the Dallas versus Portland matchup, and then the LAFC versus Cincinnati matchup. After that, you might look to Sporting Kansas City, but just my particular preference in general is I hesitate for those Sunday games if there's only one, because your options are so limited with what you're going to be able to do. And this is going to be after CCL, and who knows what the Red Bulls are doing, who knows what Kansas City is going to be doing. There's a lot of question marks around that game, and I'm just not willing to take that bet. But you could find some opportunities there. Any other final just games you want to shout out, Mike, to make people remember?
No, I mean, I think we've pretty much covered all of them. Yeah, I think that's it.
Well, great. Thanks, Mike, for joining me tonight and throwing out this idea first so we can make sure to get everybody an update on what's going on. Thank you to everyone who has been sending us questions to try to figure out what's going on. We're on this roller coaster with you. If you still have questions, feel free to send them out to me at MLS Fantasy Boss. Mike's on a little Twitter hiatus, so he may not respond, but you can hit him up to at Mike.Tiger when he's back on. You can also head over to r/fantasy MLS over at the MLS subreddit, and we have a thread that's up there talking about what's going on. You can participate there, or head over to MLS Fantasy Boss and join the Discord chat. There'll be people there to give you help as well. So you have until Saturday at 1 o'clock. Sorry, no, that's 1 o'clock if you want to get Columbus players, but that's when games start on Saturday. Friday, you're going to have a Chicago and a Vancouver game. So if you're looking at those players, maybe that's an interesting matchup that you could try to roll the dice on. But most of the games are going to be playing on Saturday. Be sure you have your lineups correctly adjusted for this weather delay cancellation switch. This game between Colorado and Seattle, I've heard, is going to be moving to September. So it's going to be a little while before we get to make this one up again. So you have anything else to add, Mike?
Just to say, on Twitter, if you do at me, I will see it and I will respond. I might not get to you right away, but I will see it eventually and get to you. So as long as it's not like a deadline question. Otherwise, if you have like a deadline pressing question, go to the Discord chat at MLSFantasyBoss.com. In fact, they got a little bit of a heads up that this was happening as far as the cancellation. So you might want to go there and get some early scoops for people who hear rumors, because there were rumors early this morning that this was going to happen, and they caught wind of that, and Trig got that information, and so that's a good place to go if you need instant feedback on teams.
That's right. All these local people with their connections with their home teams.
Connections, like journalists, and like some people like know people who know stuff. I wish I was one of those people.
Well, we found out along with everybody else, so we're getting the word out. Spread the word, please. Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful, and good luck.